Welcome to my card wallet sew along. If you've made one of the key fobs from my other video, you can make a matching card wallet. They make great sets. First, you're going to need 2 pieces of your outer fabric, 5 inches by 9 inches, and then some thin fusible fleece, 4 inches by 8 inches, another piece 5 inches by 5.5 inches wide, one piece 3 inches by 2 inches for the tab, and another piece of fusible fleece 4 inches by 2 inches, and then your keyring hardware. The first thing we're going to do is iron the fusible fleece to the wrong side of one of your pieces of fabric. Once you've done that, set the 2 larger pieces of fabric to one side. Taking your other piece of fabric, making sure that you've got it 5 inches along by 5.5 inches up. Fold it in half and you're just going to finger press to find the centre. Open that out, and if you just want to mark the centre line with a little friction pen just to make it really obvious where it is, then you want to take the small piece of fusible fleece, placing it, and this is on the wrong side of the fabric. It's quite difficult to see with my fabric because it looks the same both sides. Place it on there and then just go and iron that in place. So it will look something like this. Then you want to flip it over and fold it in half, right sides together. And then we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're just going to sew 1/4 inch along that top edge. Once you've got that, you then just want to trim that down and we're going to turn it inside out and give it a good press. Taking that piece, just note which end the folded end is, and on the opposite end you just want to top stitch a line right along there so it's nice and neat. And that's your first card holding piece. Now, taking the other piece of large fabric that doesn't have the fusible interfacing on it, take your card wallet piece and with the top stitching bit facing towards the bottom of the large piece, just pin it in place 1 inch up from the bottom and then just tack it in place. So you should get something that looks like this. Now it's time to make the key fob tab. So take this to your ironing board and you want to fold it in half, wrong sides together, give that a press. Then open it out and fold one side into the middle, give that a press, turn it over and do exactly the same on the other side. Fold it in, give it a press, and then fold the 2 into each other, and then you're simply going to top stitch, once you've given it a good press, down both sides, starting with the open edge first to make it easier, and then down the other edge. And it will look like this. So now you just want to get your D-ring or whatever key fob piece of hardware you're using, slide it onto the tab that you've just made, and then pin or clip it in place 2 inches above the top of the card wallet piece that you've just tacked into place on that longer piece of fabric. Tack that in place on your machine and you should have a piece of fabric that looks like this. Now set that aside and get the other piece of fabric that you ironed your fusible interfacing onto, and you want to mark a 1/2 inch mark down both sides of that piece of fabric on the wrong side, and then across the top you want to mark a 1/4 inch mark, and on the lines you've just drawn mark 1.5 inches in and 1.5 inches down, and then you want to get a curved edge and then just mark that curved edge, and that's what we're going to sew around to get the flap curve. And by taking the time to do these measurements, it just means that the whole thing's nice and even rather than eyeballing it. Right, we're on the home stretch, so taking the 2 large pieces of fabric, place them right sides together and clip them in place. You want to just mark along the bottom about 2 or 3 inches where we're not going to sew, because that's where we're going to turn the whole thing the right side out. Then we're going to go to the machine and we're just going to sew around following the lines that you've just drawn. So following the lines you've drawn, so 1/2 inch up the sides and 1/4 inch around the top. Just take your time going around the curve, and that means you'll have a nice smooth curve on your flapped edge. When you get to the hardware bit, just make sure that's fully tucked inside, out of the way, and then sew down to the bottom. And you're going to be doing a little back stitch at the beginning and the end just to make sure that that opening is nice and sturdy. Then you just want to clip off the corners, trim down the edge. You can trim off the spare bit now that's sticking out from your key fob. And around the curved edges, you can either do this with your pinking shears or just snip in so that they sit nice and flat when you've turned them the right side out. I just fold those tabs at the bottom in because it just makes it easier when you're sewing it up later. And then you just want to turn the whole thing inside out. Press all the corners out with your fingers, and then you can go in with your chopstick and just smooth everything out so it's sitting as nice and as flat as possible. Once you've done that, you then head over to the iron and give the whole thing a really good press. Now we're just going to top stitch along that bottom edge where the hole is, just to make it nice and neat. Do this bit neatly because this makes actually the top of the second part of the wallet. It will all make sense in a minute. Flip it over and then you want to fold up the piece that has the card wallet on it and then just clip that in place. Check it all makes sense with the flap, and then we're simply going to sew 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way round the fabric. I like doing it from the outside of the wallet because then I think it's neater, but it doesn't really matter, just as long as you've got a nice neat 1/4 inch seam and you just take your time round that top curved edge and then just do a little back stitch at the beginning and the end before you snip off the old threads. And then we're going to now just attach the cam snaps. I just checked that the cards fit in okay. It's probably a bit late if they don't, but they should do if my measurements are right. So to attach the cam snaps, you just want to mark halfway across. So it should be about 4 inches wide, so at about 2 inches in, just mark where you want the cam snap to go, put the top one in, and then once you've got that one in place and fully squished together, or whatever you call this device, then you just want to check where you want the bottom piece to go. Because I put the hole all the way through before, I've still got that there to work to. And then you want to put your bottom cam snap in. And you're done. You are now the proud owner of a really cool little card wallet that's perfect if you don't want to take a whole handbag out or a bag out with you. It takes 2 cards, and as I say, if you've made the key fob from my other sew along, if you haven't seen that one, check it out, then you can make a nice little matching set. I love them, they make great gifts. If you make it, please do share it with me.